So I'm giving a presentation tomorrow in a student organization, and I wanted to go through some of the ideas in a video. The talk is titled Perspectives on Emerging Global Organization or Planetization. I almost said civilization. That's what's implied here. Um, so the title should make clear that I'm only pretending to offer a perspective. Um, it's a particular perspective, a unique perspective, but it's on something that we share, or at least we must come to share if we hope to survive the next century. That is the planet. Um, there's certainly a lot of cultural diversity on this planet. Um, Culture, though, is not doesn't separate us from nature, and nature, at least on the planet Earth, is um, a single living system. And so while we may each have, as cultures, differentiated ourselves by cultivating nature in certain ways, we remain embedded in the earth and therefore necessarily always already in relationship with one another, which is what planetization is expressing. So, planetization, though, is something that can be looked at in at least two ways, from at least two different perspectives. One perspective would be the historical or anthropological, which would see planetization as the accidental result of the, you know, peculiar need that Western civilization has had to expand, to conquer, to convert, and to economically exploit. Um, the other perspective on planetization would be to see it in a philosophical or spiritual way, that it is or is expressing um, the necessary evolution of human consciousness. Um, I'm going to assume that the second way is true, and of course, by um, privileging that perspective, which again, these two perspectives, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but by privileging the second perspective, the philosophical or spiritual perspective, on planetization is the result of the necessary result of the evolution of human consciousness. Um, I'm obviously privileging a certain set of assumptions that may need to be questioned, and I'm open to that questioning, certainly. Um, I've drawn heavily from the writing of cultural historian William Irwin Thompson, specifically his book Pacific Shift. And in that book, Thompson attempts to imagine a future when human beings dwell upon the earth. Now, that may sound strange because you would say, well, we are human and we are already dwelling on the earth. But for Thompson, the human being is more of a possibility or an idea, an aspiration that we've yet to fully bring forth into reality. We have something called human rights. We've even written them down and pledged to provide them, but billions of people are not having those rights respected, and so, for all intents and purposes, are subhuman. Now, for that reason, the human being remains an idea. Um, in a similar way, the earth has become an abstraction and is also an idea for us. We don't live on the earth consciously, at least from the standpoint of industrial civilization. The earth is an externality. Um, our economy has, to this point, gone about its business in complete ignorance of its planetary context. The planet remained unconscious for us, but because of the large amount of pollution which had which has leaked into this planetary context, it's now forcing itself back into our consciousness in the form of an ecological crisis, um, and also with the emergence of systems science and James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, we're also beginning to recognize how the Earth works as a whole. And so we're shifting out of the idea of nature as this abstract store of resources into a sense of nature as a living, self-organizing system. So Thompson has been heavily influenced by the philosopher Gregory Bateson, who he sees as an exemplar of this new planetary way of thinking. Bateson posits that mind is immanent in nature rather than an epiphenomenon of matter as the standard industrial scientific view would be. So Bateson represents an important aspect of our return to a consciousness of the earth. And I'll quote Bateson at length from his essay called Innocence and Experience. Bateson says, "It is to the riddle of the Sphinx that I have devoted nearly 50 years of my professional life as an anthropologist." Quickly, the riddle of the Sphinx is a Greek myth where Oedipus encountered this mythological creature, the Sphinx, and she asked him a riddle. What walks on 2 legs in the morning, or what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? And Oedipus answered, the human being, who crawls as a baby, walks on 2 legs as an adult, and uses a cane when elderly. So the riddle of the Sphinx is referring to the human being. Bateson continues, "It is of first-class importance that our answer to the riddle of the Sphinx should be in step with how we conduct our civilization, and this should in turn be in step with the actual workings of living systems. The major difficulty is that the answer to the riddle of the Sphinx is partly a product of the answers that we have already given to the riddle in its various forms. Kurt Vonnegut gives us wary advice, that we should be careful what we pretend, because we become what we pretend. And something like that, some sort of self-fulfillment, occurs in all organizations and all human cultures. What people presume to be human is what they will build in as premises of their social arrangements, and what they build in is sure to be learned, is sure to become a part of the character of those who participate. And along with this self-validation of our answers, there goes something still more serious, namely, that any answer which we promote, as it becomes partly true through our promoting of it, becomes partly irreversible." So Bateson here describes how human culture is manifest, and it's a process we have to become conscious of, because as he says, what we pretend, in fact, becomes real. Because of the way the human mind is structured, basically we start to define the human being in certain ways, and then that becomes the truth, and it can no longer be questioned, because we raise young children into a particular cultural context, and they assume that these truths are absolute, and they don't recognize that actually, or they're never told at least, that actually these truths were developed through many processes of trial and error, and that the human being, the idea of the human being, is constantly changing. But we're becoming more and more conscious of this fact, and so it seems that we might say the greatest danger facing a planetary civilization is ideology, and the mode of consciousness that fosters ideology. Thompson says that ideologies are excretions of the mind. They are the exhausted remains of once living ideas. And an example of how ideology can be destructive is that for much of industrial civilization, the human being was narrowly defined as a landowning European male. This is based on a certain mythological understanding of Darwinism, where the brutal savage progresses and evolves to eventually become, the noble, polite Englishman. So globalization has thus far been rather inhumane, and the human being remains an idea. So we can't, though, want to get rid of